Good morning, you wonderful people. Thought I'd do another little morning rant here. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. The last video took me 8 hours to upload. I'm on a satellite here, so it's pretty brutal, and it pretty much takes up all of my data and bandwidth that we have here. So it really is taking an effort to get you guys these videos, so hopefully you guys appreciate it. I'd like to speak a little bit today on kind of what I've seen coming in terms of the economy. I know a lot of people aren't that interested in money. I get a lot of comments just saying like, oh, you can't eat money and money doesn't have value and all. It's all very good, relevant points. I like to view money as embodied energy. If you're able to put in a lot of energy and be super productive during a period of your life and generate money or income or currency, you're able to store that away. And I think that's a great idea, to have wealth stored away for trying times. This is a perfect example of where it's a good thing to have some money set aside. A lot of these services that the government promised are not available. All their lines are busy. It's really hard to get approved. And you wouldn't want to be in a situation where you need to rely on that, because we all need to eat, we all need food, we need resources so that we can continue on through our days. So by having some money set aside for times like this, you create what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility. And it just basically offers you a buffer so that you aren't reliant or dependent on somebody else creating fragility in your life. So that's why I often talk about finance and the economy. And what's going on right now is pretty interesting. I've seen this coming for some time, and I was trying to warn people of it. I was trying to promote people to get out of debt that wasn't serving them, to liquidate assets they didn't need, to cut down on their spending that they didn't need, and just really only spend within your means and only buy what you need. And a lot of people didn't really like that mentality. It's a hard thing to do, but now we're seeing why that is something that's really important. It's by doing that, you're able to save some money and you're able to have some resources when the economy maybe shifts or tanks. And that's why I'm an advocate of that. And so what I see coming now is somewhat frightening. I don't like to have fear. So maybe frightening is a bad word, but it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. It could very well be some trying times for all of us. Excuse me, my throat's a little dry. But basically, if we're all ordered to stay at home and we're not able to work, and at the same time, especially here in Canada, looking at the charts, the debt levels are at record highs. We've never had this much debt out. So everyone owes all this money to the banks, and including the government. The government owes more money than ever before here in Canada. So a lot of people are placing their faith and relying on the government when the government's also extremely fragile, because they're overextended on debt and they have all these liabilities. They have all these baby boomers that are going to retire, that are going to start drawing out of the system. And that is all a liability on the system. They're also going to be taxing our medical system, and that is going to require a lot of our tax money to pay for the medical expenses of these boomers as they age. There's also some other stuff going on in the economy, which is a demographic cycle. So we have all the boomers are now entering retirement, and they start drawing out of the system. So instead of contributing, they start drawing out, and they're the biggest generation to go through. If you look at the population graph, it's just a huge chunk of the population, and they were the biggest earners to ever exist. They made more money than any of us will ever probably make in history again, well, at least for decades to come. They just had extreme economic prosperity and opportunity, and way more than their parents' generation and way more than their children's generation. So they are holding all this wealth. A lot of them are highly exposed to the stock market, to real estate, and various assets like that. The thing is, they're all going to start selling off these assets to fund their retirement. And the interesting thing is, they're all going to sell at a very similar time. When the economy tanks and starts to get tough and money becomes more scarce or harder to earn, people start selling off assets to fund their life. And the thing is, they're going to sell to the younger generations, the new up and coming, the new earners. And that's our generation, the younger generations. And we haven't had as much access to money as a lot of these people. So we don't have the same amount of capital to purchase all these assets from them. So what I see happening is a huge deflation in these assets, in real estate, in stocks, etc. And there's no telling how long this deflation will last. However, I think it's evident that we're already entering this deflationary period. The big argument becomes, how long will it last and how low will it go? So personally, I don't like to catch a falling knife. I am going to wait until I see clear evidence of strength returning to the markets. And then, yeah, maybe you won't catch the very bottom, but that way you can confirm that we have capitulated, we have turned around, and markets are going to head back up. In the meantime, I want to stay far away from all this and I want to let it play out. There's so much debt and phony money creation by the governments that happened in 2008 crisis that basically inflated all of these assets into bubble territory. Real estate off the hooks, all the stocks way off the charts, just went parabolic. So many things overpriced. And now with all of us being ordered to stay home and not be able to work, a lot of people are carrying huge debt levels and they're going to have a hard time covering that debt. So what I see coming is a lot of people are going to be forced to foreclose and to sell off assets to cover their debts that they owe. And very few people are actually holding capital and have a surplus of capital in this time. There's wild surveys in Canada saying, and even the US saying, that a lot of people are 40% of people can't afford a surprise $100 bill during the month. That is wild. Like, that is highly fragile. People are highly over leveraged. They don't have money tucked away for this kind of a situation. And we're about to see what kind of fragility that causes in the system. So a lot of people are most likely going to be forced to start liquidating these assets. And those of us that were saving in the last 10 years and took advantage of this economic prosperity will hopefully have some asset or some capital to buy these distressed assets. And the plan that I see is the central banks are planning for this. They purposely crashed this, whether you want to believe it or not. I don't think it was coronavirus. This was intentional. I saw it coming before they even announced coronavirus. This is an ongoing thing. It's all orchestrated in the markets. What they do is they push out all this debt. They get everyone leveraged on debt, saying that it's only going to go up. Everyone buys with that belief. And then what they do is they crash the economy and everyone can't afford to hold on to the debt that they borrowed. And so all the assets get distressed, and then the governments come in, the central banks come in, they print the money out of thin air, they counterfeit it, and with that counterfeit money, they come in and they buy up all the assets. So they'll buy back all the real estate. All these people who thought they owned real estate, they were just holding mortgages on it. And if you can't afford to hold on to it during trying times, you're forced to liquidate, and that asset is no longer yours. So this is an orchestrated play by the elites. And I see it's a global takeover. I mean, we could have the black swan, the positive black swan, where something comes in, there's a new currency issued backed by gold. There's some talk of that with Trump. But even that, I'm very skeptical. I don't put my faith in anyone else. I believe in radical self-reliance, and I believe in taking care of ourselves. You can't rely on the government. You can't rely on others, as many of you are already finding out. Even a lot of people you think are friends, and that you'll soon find out who your true friends are. During trying times, a lot of stuff changes. So I'm a believer in radical self-reliance, looking after ourselves. And what I see is they're intentionally crashing markets. and printing all this currency. So now they can come and buy up all the distressed assets. And another thing that it's doing is it's wiping out small businesses. Small businesses can't afford to continue on. They can't afford to pay their workers. They can't afford the debt that they borrowed. And a lot of them are going to go belly up. So that's a very scary thing. And what it does is it transfers, it's the largest wealth transfer we might ever see in history, where all of the elites, the big corporations, the central banks they come in with this money that they print and they loan to one another, and they buy up all these distressed assets, where the average Joe like you and I, we don't have access to that kind of stuff, so we're not able to take advantage of that. And we're already seeing that in gold and silver markets. True asset, gold and silver is true money. I'll speak on that in future videos, why that is the case. And already you're seeing you can't, as a normal person, you can't get access to that. In Canada, the Canadian Mint is now sold out of gold and silver. There's minimum 2 to 4 week wait times for bullion, and there's minimums. It's $12,000 minimum buy-in for gold and a $2,500 minimum buy-in for silver. So most people don't have that kind of money in Canada right now. It's a sad, true fact. So what's going to happen is they're going to be stuck into Canadian dollars. They're stuck in the currency. Well, the governments print all this currency to try and keep markets afloat. And every time they print currency, it devalues the currency because they're counterfeiting it. They're increasing the supply. It's like watering down the punch at the party. When the punch gets low and there's not much alcohol left and people's buzz is wearing off and they want to keep the party going, you just add a bit of juice. They're out of booze, so they just add a bit of juice. So people are drinking more and more juice to keep the buzz going, keep the party going, but it's having less of an effect. That's what's happening with our money supply. They're increasing it, they're watering it down, and what that does is it kills the buying power. We're already seeing that in home prices didn't necessarily soar in Canada. It's not that house prices went up in terms of taking more actual value to buy that house. What happened is the value of our Canadian dollars decreased. So it took more of that same Canadian dollar to buy that same house or that same asset. So a lot of people fail to recognize that reality. I like to compare things to gold because gold is something they can't easily counterfeit. The most we can increase the supply of gold in any given time is an average of about 2% a year. And I think the most we ever did was 2.7 in a year at like max capacity. All the mines ramped up and we were only able to increase the supply by 2.7% that year. So gold is a more sure thing. We know they have a hard time just counterfeiting. They can't just counterfeit it. Well, they do counterfeit gold, actually. There's a lot of gold-plated fake bullion out there, so you do have to be careful. However, it's much more difficult to counterfeit than, say, government currencies where they just print it and they're doing it right in front of our face. And actually, people are so ill-informed on finance and money that people aren't outraged at that. People should be outraged. They're stealing our wealth through inflation. And we're all busy working for dollars, but at the same time, dollars are losing their purchasing power and their value at an exponential rate. So this is something that I suggest we all become informed on. And the best approach I see is diversifying in a time like this, buying some gold, buying some silver, buying some Bitcoin. And if you don't have assets, the best thing you can do, if you don't have capital, the best thing I see you can do is start a garden, do your best to pay down your debt, buy some food before we enter hyperinflation. Because what happens is we go into this deflationary period, central banks create all this currency to try and keep things going, keep the party going, and then that eventually comes into the market in the form of inflation, but it's a lagging indicator. So what will happen is that right now, the last price surge we've seen in the last 10 years was a result of the currency creation in 2008. So this huge amount of capital that they're creating right now to try and paper over this financial crisis, that will come into play in the next 5 to 10 years. So what I see coming is a short deflationary period that could last 6 months, could last a year, could last 2 years. We don't know. And then all that money that they pumped into the markets will come flooding back when people rush to buy true assets. So when that happens, that's when we enter true hyperinflation, and houses could go up into the millions. Like there's no telling. And it's not that the price of the value of the home is going up. It's that it's taking more and more of that same dollar to buy the same house. So it doesn't really matter that a house becomes worth $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, because you could sell that house and you're just getting paper or these phony digits in a bank account saying, oh, you have a one with this many zeros behind it in Canadian or US dollars. It becomes irrelevant. The true money is hard assets that you can feel, that you can hold, that they can't inflate away. So that would be gold and silver. And I suggest you do some reading on Bitcoin and learn about that, because it's a new technology that ensures that there's a certain supply and they can't counterfeit it. And it's going to be the only place left to run for a lot of people, as gold and silver already is out of reach for most people that might only have a few hundred or a few $1,000s in their account. So in that case, the true value, I do agree, is things like fresh water, arable land, food, shelter, tools, gardening tools, that kind of stuff. That is all stuff that has true value. So if you're pretty limited on capital, I would suggest just buying food, that non-perishable food that you can store, because it's just a good thing. Prices could start soaring at any point in the next few years, or even months. We don't know when the inflation will start. And if you only have so much money, it's a good point. There's no point in buying gold or silver. I would start by paying down your debt, getting some food set aside so you're anti-fragile in that regard. If we have food shortages or prices soar, you're okay. You have some supplies in your cupboard set away. And if you can kind of get beyond that point and you have capital to go beyond that, that's when you want to start looking at things like gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And my play is to buy those assets and stay diversified. And I also hold a good portion in cash, because there's no telling how low these assets will go. So at that point, I will come in with the cash I have and I will buy some of these assets. And my plan is to ride those assets up as the currencies devalue and people soar into the hard assets, like the stuff I just mentioned. And I will, my play is to ride that up as the value of those rise. And then with that rise in capital, my plan is to come in and buy real estate. So there's no telling how low real estate could go. Deflation is a scary thing. Keynesian economists, the Keynesian economic theory that we currently use is madness, and deflation is their worst enemy. There's not much they can do about it. They will start giving away money for free. They print it and they just give it away. They give tax breaks. They do anything they can to keep the economy going and inflating, because they can't do anything about deflation. And we've seen what happens in deflation. Japan's been in deflation for 20 plus years, and their economy's never come back. Real estate crashed 60+% in Japan, and 20 years later, it's still down 20%. People just don't think that can happen here. People have been brainwashed to think real estate only goes up, and that even if it does go down, it's a short-lived thing, like 2008, where some places it was 6 months, some places in the States it was longer. It was 5-10 years in some places for it to reach the levels it was at. However, deflation can happen where it just doesn't come back, and that could also happen. So we just don't know. And I think some of the best things you can do that will protect you either way are start investing in a garden, start producing your own food, get some chickens, that kind of stuff. That is all stuff that isn't going to hurt either way. Either way, that's bringing back our food source to having local food production. It creates anti-fragility. We're not relying on China and imports for our food source. And it's also a good place to put your time and energy. We all need to eat. When times get tough, we don't need the trip to Mexico. We don't need the extra car. We don't need the vacation home. We don't need all the toys. A lot of that stuff will start to get liquidated, and the true value comes out. We realize what we truly need, and that is food and shelter. And so that is a good place. If you don't have much capital, that's where I see or even if you do have capital, I think the best place to put our energy right now is into food production and just getting a little garden ready, getting some chickens, maybe getting into hunting or fishing and learning how to source your own food, because the money very well in the next while could start losing its value and prices could get really expensive. So that, I've rambled on long enough. I'm sorry, I know this is a long video. There's a lot I want to share with you guys. And now this, I can already tell this video is going to take me 9+ hours to upload. I didn't mean for it to drag on this long, but I just really want to share the information that I've learned with you guys. And I hope you guys get some value out of this. I hope you like and share the video so more can start to at least expand what they see as a possibility. And I hope to inspire others to do your own research. Don't listen to me. Don't take what I'm saying as truth. Learn for yourself. Go and study finance. Go and look at history and see what happened. That's where you learn. You have to learn this knowledge for yourself. So I just hope by talking about this, I inspire others to start doing their own research and looking into this and creating anti-fragility so that we can all learn to save what we have and learn to prosper in trying times. With that being said, I love you guys. Thank you for your time. As always, God bless and have a wonderful day.